right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast, and I'm excited to welcome Dr. Emma Wells to the show today, who is an ecclesiastical historian and a buildings archaeologist. So, Dr. Wells, thanks so much for taking time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to getting you on the show, but I got to tell you, though, this was actually kind of a hard one for me to prepare for, because to say that you're just an ecclesiastical historian and a buildings archaeologist, that's just a small fraction of what it is that you actually do. You're someone who wears many hats, but we'll try to see what we can cover in this episode today. But kind of rolling into this, though, besides what I just mentioned about you, what else is it that you're up to? Just kind of give us a little bit of an overview about what it is that you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I suppose we can call me a polymath, but if that's a positive, I don't know. But my day job is lecturer in ecclesiastical and architectural history / archaeology at the University of York, and I lead two postgraduate courses there, one in Parish Church Studies, one in English building history. But on top of that, I'm an author. I've got several books out, several forthcoming. Broadcasters do bits of TV, bits of radio, TV series, all that kind of stuff. I have my own seminar series, got merch line coming. So everything, I think, everything you can think of. I've got fingers in all pies.
Yeah. Well, I know one of those is the study in medieval pilgrimages. And, your first book was Pilgrim Routes of the British Isles. And, you were talking about some of the different pilgrim ways. And I was particularly fascinated to learn about this and read your book because, one of my favorite pastimes is, trail hiking, walking, and things like that. And so I was kind of really taken to learning some of these different pilgrim routes. But what I'm kind of curious to ask you is, before we kind of dive into that, is just this passion for history that you have. You've put a lot of work into pursuing this passion, everything from your education and, of course, your work. But where did this come from? Take us back a little bit. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I suppose it begins with my grandmother. She used to take me around local churches and abbeys and castles and all that sort of thing. Growing up in North Yorkshire in England, we're surrounded by medieval architecture, really. There's castles down the road, there's a church around the corner. There's history everywhere. So she used to take me to a different place every week. So that was sort of what I grew up with. And then I did Tudor history at A level, which is, the end of art, which would be your senior year, I suppose, it's in high school, and it's our sort of sixth form, as we call it. So for A level, which was quite rare at the time. And so I loved the Tudors. And then after that, I did a degree in art history. So I didn't go down the archaeology or the history route. I went via art history. And obviously all of it's pretty much churches because it's Middle Ages, it's a lot of interesting church architecture. So that's how I got into it, really.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you're absolutely right. It's just how vast and how far back history goes there in the UK. Because, when I came back to the States after, my time in York, that's where I studied for my MA. And again, just like reading your book and still being connected with some of my colleagues there, I'm like, dang, I missed out on a lot. It's just, there was so much there that I missed out on. But now, of course, with you kind of diving into, again, medieval pilgrimages and, architecture within that area, what was it about this particular area that led you to focus on this? Because, again, with, history being so vast there in the UK, I mean, you could have dove into the Roman era or the Anglo-Saxon era or something else entirely. But what was it about this medieval era and also more specifically pilgrimages that kind of drew you into studying that so in depth?
Yeah, I think when I did my art history degree, we had to take sort of certain modules, to cover certain things. And for some reason, I just decided to take ones related to the church. I went to Catholic secondary school, Catholic high school. So I think I was probably drawn to it then. I knew a bit more about it. So I thought, screw it. I'll just do what I know, I suppose. And then from that, because everything Middle Ages was centered around churches, I did one module on European art of the High Middle Ages, which was essentially cathedrals, in France and England. And then I did one on stained glass, which was in stained glass in churches. And then from there, I got interested in pilgrimage because I was focusing on sort of shrines and the saints and all that sort of thing, which essentially much of architecture is about. It's a representation of heaven on earth. That's what churches technically are. The heaven in Jerusalem, heaven on earth, all that. And, the cult of saints are a part of it. Pilgrims are coming to churches, they're leaving their money, they're praying to the saints for, cure, or I don't know, you have a hangover, or you have a leg falling off, I don't know, whatever it might be. So, you pray to the saints, you give your money. And that really intrigued me, because this architecture was essentially built around people giving away their cash.
I never would have thought to look at it that way before, but okay, yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
It's a huge economic enterprise, which I don't think we think that Christendom and the medieval church, let's just be honest, was all about the exchange of money from one set of society to the other, and it still is. And relics that, of the saints, there was a vast enterprise of trade and stealing and, surreptitiously faking relics. So, it's a vast underground enterprise.
And I suppose not much of that has really changed yet up until today, has it?
Hell no. I should say hell no. It still is. And they're still trying to say, this isn't the body of whichever saint. And actually, it's from this era. St. James, I think they recently said, well, it can't be the body of him because it's several, 100 years, centuries later than what it is. And some of them were like duck's bones or pig's bones and duck's blood mixed with saffrons, to make these unctions. So, does it really matter if what you're praying for works? I suppose not. It's about faith. So
yeah, and I guess it does make someone feel good to get their prayers out there. Yeah, for sure. So, and again, not much different today either.
Exactly the same. Yeah. Nothing's changed.
All right. Well, I'm going to do my best to keep up today because, again, when I was living in York, I've only picked up so much. I don't know how much history someone can pick up within like a year, especially when, I was focusing more on the archaeology side of the house versus the historical side of the house. But it's picked up a few things here and there, but I'm looking forward to it. And what you have to say today. And again, I hope I could keep up. I'll do my best. So I guess just kind of diving in a little bit more into your work. In your book, again, the title is Pilgrim Routes to the British Isles, hashtag shameless plug. You're welcome. You covered 7 different routes, scattered all around the UK there. So could you just maybe give us a little bit of an overview of the different routes are out there? And I guess I'll just say some of the significance behind them, because I'm sure they all serve a similar purpose, but they're all unique kind of in their own ways and centered around different saints and what have you. So yeah, I guess I'll turn the floor over to you. Fill us in on that.
Yeah, my book covers 7 particular routes, but there's no... The reason that it covers those particular routes is they're the ones with sort of the most interesting historical origins. And the reason I'm saying that is, like you said, a lot of pilgrimage today centered around sort of hiking trails or tourism or whatever, whichever country you're in. And so now they hit the sort of tourist attractions as well as those associated with particular saints. So in my book, I cover everything from the St. Cuthbert's Way, which runs from the sort of northeast, Lindisfarne, the Holy Island, all the way across the borders between England and Scotland to sort of the middle of the country, I suppose. And Hadrian's Wall takes in there, so the greatest Roman wall, I suppose. And then there's the Pilgrim's Way, which is from St. Thomas Becket Shrine, or ends at St. Thomas Becket Shrine in Canterbury Cathedral, one of the most famous martyred saints, I suppose, in the world, really. And then we have, the Saints' Way, which is in Cornwall, so the southwest of the country, which is really interesting because Cornwall is perhaps one of the, I want to say, the most ancient of lands. It's where we get that sort of Celtic tradition comes from, although who are the Celts? That could be a whole podcast in and of itself.
Right.
But actually, for example, the Saints' Way, it's been created to take in a lot of different, holy wells and interesting churches with particular associations with saints, holy wells that are within churches, saint shrines that are associated with churches, tombs of saints, all that sort of thing. But there isn't actually an historical trail that we know of. A lot of these pilgrim routes aren't ancient. And what I mean by that is they've been created over the years. They've been formed from the landscape, from people using these trails because, they were the safest routes to take. so you didn't get attacked by marauders or, people coming out of the bushes to steal from you. And they were ancient drovers' ways, so where people went to trade. Obviously, they didn't have, highways and byways and roads. So they've essentially been formed from these interesting trails that just, they were just common trails. And over the years, people just added to them and said, oh, this is the St. Cuthbert's Way because it's famous. Oh, this ends at Canterbury Cathedral. So we do know the Pilgrim's Way. I will say that. Pilgrim's Way from Winchester to Canterbury was an historic trail, is on maps from the medieval era. Pretty much all the others are created later on because it's where people like to walk. So I hope that hasn't burst anyone's bubble, but they're extremely interesting trails to hike because, you might see a holy well, you might see a stone circle, you might see a saint shrine, you might see a really interesting ancient, even Anglo-Saxon, probably shouldn't use that term anymore, but early medieval church.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, yeah, it's not too uncommon to how trails are formed like elsewhere in the world too, just like the consistent foot traffic, or maybe even then, I guess, I don't know what they had in the way of like vehicle traffic, horse and buggy traffic, maybe?
Yeah, they had buggies like carts. Yeah, okay. You did have carts.
Okay, yeah. So then that's, naturally just going to form the trails and, change the landscape with all that traffic. So, and I think if I recall, I mean, I had a couple of ordnance survey maps. I want to say from when I was in hiking in Scotland. I think maybe some of these trails were on there. I mean, they've pretty much stood the test of time to appear on modern maps today. Yeah.
Yeah. These are. I mean, a lot of them they're all over the OS map, the Ordnance Survey maps, which are the map to use if you're going hiking or trailing or whatever. So they are ingrained there. But so this is the point about OS maps started, in the 19th century. So some of the interest you'll see, some of them will be on those original OS maps, so the 19th century maps, but you'll see if they aren't, you'll see what they take in. So there might be, I don't know, as I say, a stone circle, there might be an old church, there might be a holy well, there might be a saint shrine or an area that a saint is associated with, like a cave or something. And they're all marked on the Ordnance Survey map. So they've kind of been put together. And St. Cuthbert's Way, for example, is supposedly partly a route that he probably had taken from Lindisfarne to Melrose Abbey, which is just over the border in Scotland, which is where he started his training as a monk. So he probably would have trailed, those particular areas. So depending on the trail, there are different associations and why they've come to be these trails. But even newer ones are being created. We now have the Northern Saints Way, which has just been created from Durham Cathedral and sort of meets up with the St. Cuthbert's Way. So, people are creating them even to this day.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. I mean, that's more opportunities for us to get out there and explore. So yeah, I can dig it. So, and actually kind of like going along with that, I mean, like right now, what's kind of like the current status as far as walking the trails right now? I mean, I'm not sure if like COVID measures, if these trails are closed. I mean, can people these are outside, but I mean, what is it looking like right now?
So until tomorrow, I think it is. God knows, I have no idea. I think it's till tomorrow that we technically, depends where you live. So the regulations for us are that you can meet one person outside of your household to go for a walk or a leisure activity or something outside, but you have to stay in your local area. I don't know what local area is. If someone knows, I'd love to know, because local area to me is 10, 15 miles. A local area to someone living in London is probably, a mile. So I don't know. It's local to me is probably, I couldn't get away with traveling up to Lindisfarne, to go on the St. Cuthbert's Way, because that's like 2-ish hours. But from tomorrow, I think you're allowed to meet people up to 6 people outside your household. So I think you can travel further. So don't take my word as gospel, because I have no idea. I don't think anyone knows. But I think from tomorrow, yes, you can technically. Okay.
All right. Well, yeah, definitely everyone double check, first and verify that. So you're not caught out there, outside of the means. But so hopefully, yeah, by then, let's see, it's currently March 28th when we're recording. So hopefully by the time this episode goes released, people can actually go and maybe walk the entire length of one of these, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, we know with the same by June the 21st, all regulations should be, gone. So come summer, we should be fine.
Okay. All right. Which would probably be like the best time to get out there and walk these trails.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm sure. I mean, I do remember like getting into like some of the like late spring, early summer months, living there in the UK. That's when the sun actually would come out finally. Didn't see much of the sun during the fall and the winter.
No. No.
That was a bit of an adjustment. And then also just how it would get dark at like 4:30 in the evening, during the winter time. I can see why Dracula was drawn to England in the novel. So,
I mean, the Dracula is obviously associated with Whitby, which is not far away. But yeah, I think about 4 p.m., which I don't think I think it's similar as well in some parts of the US. From what I've heard, I have friends living in like the Northeast, and they seem to have a similar-ish clock.
I think so. Yeah, it really does depend where you are. I know that the Pacific Northwest, states like Washington and Oregon are usually where you would get like a lot of consistent rain, heavy cloud cover. That's where that whole Twilight series takes into place because the vampires liked having all that cloud cover. I'm not really a fan of that series, but
yes, I have a friend who lives near the forest where they filmed. I do remember that. It's the one thing. She was when I was at Durham doing my PhD. She said, "I live near the Twilight Forest." Oh.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area, but I don't know if I could live there long term. But the U.S. is kind of unique in that you can any sort of like natural features or environment that you want, we have it here. We got like the rainforest in the Pacific Northwest. If you go to like the Southwest, like Arizona, New Mexico, you got the high desert and high crazy like 14,000 foot mountains in states like Colorado, and then you got like the swamps and alligators and like down in Florida where I live, and then you got harsh winters up in Michigan where I'm from originally. So we got a little something for everyone when it comes to nature here in America.
We don't. We don't. We just have cold and a bit of sunshine.
All right. Well, I mean, again, get into the summer, when restrictions loosen up a little bit, people can get out and about. So I say this conversation is pretty timely when we're talking about the different routes out there. But all right. So what I want to focus in on now and ask you, out of these 7 routes, and you said that these were the ones that you just focused on for the book, but you said there's others out there as well. But I mean, which one is your favorite, and what was it about this particular trail that made it your favorite?
I think you probably know because I've mentioned it so many times, but I think it has to be the St. Cuthbert's Way. And I always say this, so I'm very boring, I'm afraid. But the reason that it is my favorite, one of my favorite, but it is the favorite. If you've never been to Holy Island, which is Lindisfarne on the northeast coast of Northumbria, which is right on the border between England and Scotland. I think it's a place like no other. I mean, it's an island probably, I don't know how actually big it is, maybe 3 miles around, or maybe a little bit more than that, but it's very small. And you have to wait for the tide to come in and out in order to drive across. And every time I take friends across who've never been there, like, you have to wait for the sea. Yes, you've got to wait, and then just put your foot down and just pray like shit that it doesn't like come over and you don't get taken by the tide, because that happens quite a lot. But when you get on this island, it has a castle that was built in the reign of Henry VIII, and then the gardens were redesigned by Edward Lutyens, who's a really famous architect from the 19th century, and he created the magazine Country Life, which is big. It's quite a big magazine over here. And then there's the an abbey. There's ruins from even the World War, and then there's the island on which Saint Cuthbert supposedly lived, which dates from like the 6th, 7th century, and then was sort of rebuilt, which is really interesting. It's sort of why was it rebuilt? So I actually wrote a paper on this because he died several hundred years before, and yet it was Oh, are you still there, Josh?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, we just cut out for just a second there.
Oh, it went. Yeah, okay. So the island was rebuilt a couple of hundred years after St. Cuthbert died. So why was it rebuilt? Obviously for tourism purposes. People were still tourists in the 9th century. So I think that's my favorite. It's just, there's nowhere like Holy Island. When you're on that island, it feels like the rest of the world just melts away. And that's the end of this, of the way, of the route. But throughout you go, to Melrose Abbey, where St. Cuthbert started his career. You go through some of the most ancient churches that the UK has to offer, some holy wells that are just in the middle of nowhere. And you think, I'm probably one of the only people who's been here for the past 500 years. And even a cave where St. Cuthbert's body was brought. So you really get to touch history from, the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th century and before that.
It kind of makes me wonder when someone came across Holy Island for the first time and just deciding to wait. Okay, we'll wait till this water recedes somehow. I'm sure it will in a second. Then we can head on over there and we can start building, everything there and naming it Holy Island. And I think that kind of ties in well with kind of like one of the approaches that you are kind of sort of focusing on and that you pass on to your students at the University of York. And that is, you kind of talk about senses, the sensory approach. And so, where does this approach kind of come from? And I guess just, can you give us a little bit of an overview on it? Because I think not only does this go well with, the study of, medieval art and architecture, if I can speak today, but I think just like this could help make modern day travel experiences much more, fulfilling, kind of using this sensory approach as well. So can you kind of give us an overview on it and just, some of what it entails?
Yeah, well, my PhD was focused on the sensory experience of pilgrimage art and architecture. So I looked at how churches were created for pilgrims and the shrines and all the settings and surroundings. So, when a pilgrim walked in, how did the senses bombard them? What were they smelling? What were they seeing? What were they eating? What were they touching? What were they kissing, licking, all those kind of things? Because they were doing that. They were kissing, licking relics and, sort of bones. So I was really interested in the fact that no one, I think because I want to feel what it felt like in the past. That's why I study history and archaeology. I want to know, I want to feel, I want that sort of experiential, environmental experience. And so I want to understand that. And that's why I focused on the senses. No one was really doing it at the time. It was quite new when I did my PhD. But I've sort of taken that and been, applying it to different research environments and platforms. And I looked at the Reformation, so the break with Rome and Henry VIII and sort of dissolution of the Catholic Church in England and how that affected, your experience of devotion in the Parish Church. When Catholicism had gone, you had this new experience of the church in England. And now I also look at it as pilgrimage as well, on pilgrimage routes. I haven't done as much on, for example, walking a pilgrimage route, but you can, the point of it is to understand how it felt to be a medieval pilgrim. What were you smelling? What were you seeing? So when you get to these places, and I appreciate a lot of them are now ruins or some of the things aren't there, but you need to be looking at the sort of minutiae of the experience of the setting. What's the art and what would the art and architecture be like on the walls of, say, a medieval church? Would there be different smells? Who would be surrounding you? How would you be interacting with, a saint's tomb or shrine? Would you be getting close to the relics? So it's all about that. And I think we try and do that anyway when we're on a pilgrim route, and we do try and take in the environment, but it's about being aware of how things have changed from now as opposed to then.
Right. And I do like this idea because, especially if you were to go tour, let's say, a castle somewhere, you got like a lot of interpretive signs that will tell you, facts and figures. This castle was made from this day to that date. It was made using this type of stone or this type of wood or what have you. But it's just kind of creating that more immersive experience. Again, for not only those who would say are on a modern day pilgrimage or just those who are just the modern day tourists visiting these places. It does kind of create that much more immersive feeling and that much deeper connection to the past that they're able to kind of utilize their senses in this way. Exactly that.
It's about trying to engage with the past as much as possible with history.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, having not been able to explore any of these pilgrim routes myself, there was one in particular that stood out to me when I was reading your book. And I think I really would like to try St. Andrew's Way. first. Well, mostly just because I kind of have, especially living in Florida now, I do have a little bit of an affinity towards the water. So, and I kind of like how this route like kind of hugs the water pretty well. But then this might sound a little bit silly, but then when you mentioned base rock in the book, and I looked up a picture of this, it reminded me of like Dragonstone from like Game of Thrones or something.
I've never watched Game of Thrones. Don't tell anyone.
Okay.
I know.
So,
I know. Right. I'm not a medievalist. Am I? I do play Assassin's Creed. If that makes it any better. But.
Okay. Well, better, but it's still not Game of Thrones. But anyway, so quick spoiler, I guess. Well, not really a spoiler, but there's a certain setting in the Game of Thrones story called Dragonstone, and it's an island, kind of like off the coast from the capital city in this fictitious world, and that's kind of what it sort of reminded me of, because it's just this big rock, like sheer cliff island with the castle kind of sort of embedded into it, and that's exactly what I thought of when I looked up a picture of this thing. It's like, that's Dragonstone. And
that's also like Lindisfarne, Holy Island, because you've got the big castle on top of the crag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a lot of these kind of weird crag castle things. There's loads along the northeast coast, so I get what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, and I'm like, okay, that's what I need to do. Yeah. Even if I don't walk the entire route, I need to get a boat out to Base Rock next time I'm in the UK, because I do want to like see this. Because like I said, it's reminding me of Dragonstone from Game of Thrones.
That's why I didn't like it. I didn't like the dragons.
Okay. Now based on our conversation, do you see yourself actually catching up on all the seasons? There's 8 seasons of that show, or not? Well, of course. Then again, do you even have much time to really watch shows?
No.
Because it's like you're one of the most busy people I know. So.
Oh, I doubt it. No, I do watch a lot of TV. But my TV. Yeah, I do. I'm sort of one of those people who doesn't watch what's really popular, because it annoys me. When Bridgerton came out recently, I'm just like, oh, I don't care. That sort of thing. So I tend to just, I use TV to relax. So it'll be a kind of Real Housewives or something rather than anything history, because I'm just done with history. And I get, when it's like 9 p.m. at night.
No. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So kind of shifting gears a little bit. And again, we were talking about how there's just so much to see in the UK. You were talking about that, all these even small towns, a lot of them have like their own castles or their own, fantastic church, or just even as something as simple as like a well somewhere was visited by such and such person way back when. So that has that drawing effect of these smaller communities out there too. So let's say you had a bank holiday weekend. So on a Friday or a Monday is a bank holiday. So you got 3 days off. What would you go out and see and do? And I guess, what would you even recommend to anyone who might be in a similar circumstance? If they have a few days, let's say in the UK, where would you go?
It's so difficult because it's just so vast. But I would say it depends on what you're into, I suppose. Are you into the Middle Ages? Are you into the Tudors? Are you into the Georgians? Are you into the Victorians? I would say you have to come. If anyone's come to the UK, just come to the north, because it's better. It's better in the north because we have a lot more, particularly in the Yorkshire area. We have pretty much everything. So you need to come to North Yorkshire, which is where I live, because you can literally just go down the road and you can find a random castle in the middle of nowhere. Go 3 miles down the road, you'll find another one. There's not as much sort of focused on North Yorkshire, but the North Yorkshire was huge with the Tudors, for example. We have, for example, Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's, which one? 5th wife? No. Last wife, isn't it? Yeah, last wife. Last wife.
I would never would have guessed.
Yeah, 6th wife. She lived literally 4 miles from where I live.
Oh, wow.
Her house, someone lives in the house. It comes up for rent occasionally. So if you want to live in Catherine Parr's old digs, you can. A couple of miles, about 10 miles down that way, you can go up into the Yorkshire Dales, and there's Bolton Castle, which is where Mary Queen of Scots was held prisoner. And there's sort of where she fled from the castle to get away, and she dropped her shawl. So there's a field called the Shawl. And then you can go across to York, obviously like the greatest medieval city in the UK. If you want to feel like you're in Harry Potter, you just go to York. And there is a Harry Potter shop as well if you need to get your fix. You have York Minster there, which is one of the greatest medieval cathedrals in the world. And then you have all the medieval buildings down Stonegate, which is one of the oldest, and the Shambles as well, which is one of the two of the oldest streets in the UK. What else do we have? And then there's a castle there, which was where sort of the end of the Pilgrimage of Grace, if you know anything about the Tudors. Essentially, a few men got their heads chopped off and were hung in chains from the castle there. So, I mean, we have all the...
Oh, dang.
And as you're coming into the city, you have the bars, which are the big gates. And that's where they used to put the heads of people that they chopped their head off. And they used to, it was sort of a warning saying, don't mess with us Northerners, or this will happen to you.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought up York. York has a and of course I put this in the outline saying that I wanted to talk about York a little bit just because nostalgia. It's a little bit selfish on my part to talk about this with you, because like out of all the places that I lived in my life, I was stationed in North Carolina when I was in the Marine Corps. And then I, went back to Michigan for a time for undergrad. And then I spent 2 years in West Africa for Peace Corps. And this is all before I moved to England. Now, out of all those stints that I've done, by the time that chapter was coming to a close, I was pretty much ready to go, ready to move on to something else. But once I had finished my master's degree program at York, I wasn't quite ready to leave. I just really loved living there. I just loved, the history. There was a good vibe to the place. There was, I had my shops, I had my gym, and all that stuff. It was tough leaving all that. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about it. But I'm also kind of curious, what kind of brought you to York? I mean, was it mostly just for you to start your job as a lecturer, or are you kind of from that area originally? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I live about just under an hour from York anyway, but the reason that I went to York really was to do my first degree in art history. So I went to York for that. Then I did my MA in Buildings Archeology. So it was kind of the best place to go. It was the best university to go to for what I wanted to do. So it just happened to be quite close to home. I knew the city. It was my favorite city. I used to, I grew up going to the city. And then when I did my PhD, I went to Durham, which is probably similar distance, just north. What York is south of me, Durham is north of me. So two great medieval cities, and it was perfect for what I was doing.
Gotcha. Yeah. And one thing York, if someone comes to the city, and especially if they get on the Roman walls and they look in towards the city center, they will see this majestic building, York Minster. Now, in your upcoming book, Heaven on Earth, you're breaking down some of the greatest cathedrals in the world. I'm just kind of curious, and if maybe I could ask you to give a little bit of a sneak peek. Is York Minster going to make the cut?
It does. I mean, it's 20 of the world's greatest cathedrals, but it's not a list, if you will. It's not, I think these are the world's greatest cathedrals. It's just, they're all the chapters in my book. Each chapter is a different cathedral. It's all around Christendom, or let's just say technically Europe, although Russia is in there as well. But it's essentially those with really interesting origin tales, interesting stories surrounding their construction, but they're all technically Gothic cathedrals. So we start, I'm trying to think the earliest, which I suppose is technically, which is Saint-Denis in France. So early 11th, 12th century, we're going from right up to the 16th century, when technically the Gothic era ended. Okay,
gotcha. And so I don't know why I didn't even think to look this up before we even getting on the call, let alone when I was living out there. But when did this Gothic style cathedrals, around what time frame are we looking at here as far as when construction began towards completion and things like that?
We could have a whole podcast about this. Now, technically, it's sort of early 12th century, let's just say, with Saint-Denis. Most people say that Saint-Denis is the birth of Gothic, if you will, and Abbot Suger engineered Gothic. The reason that I'm sort of hesitating is because it's just the first time that we see Gothic elements. So, the ribbed vaults, the pointed arches, flying buttresses, the scaffolded, sort of a skeleton around the outside. of the church. It's where they all came together as one for the first time. And then we see that sort of rolling out, going across the UK. You get into England, you see them at Canterbury, the East End, and then you see Wells and Salisbury, etc., etc. And so, as I say, early 12th century, but the style, the features, the elements that we're talking about were already being installed in churches across northern France prior to this, even within Cistercian architecture, you know, the monastic order. Even in England, we see elements of these features being inserted in different places. It's just that when they all come together, that's what we know as Gothic.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Just that's one thing I always kind of enjoyed about this building. You know, every time I would walk past it, like on my way to King's Manor for class, you know, for anyone who doesn't know, the Department of Archaeology is not on York's main campus. It's out there in the city center. So I would go past this building every single morning to go to class, and it was just so
and
amazing.
Go to Starbucks. You have to get you just have to go to the oldest Starbucks in the world on the corner of Stonegate.
Wait, is it back? Because last time we talked, you said
it was gone. It's still gone. It's still not there. It's Joe Malone, the perfume store, I think now, or something. But no, it's not there.
Oh well, that's a bit of a weird transition. You know, take it from a Starbucks away to put in a perfume shop.
It's expensive perfume.
Okay. All right. But you know, I mean, just you know, as you were kind of mentioning, there's many other things to do and see in and around York. You know, the Minster is definitely a highlight, and there's several others. You know, you brought up the Shambles earlier as well. Yeah. But you know, when you kind of first started taking to the city and you know, exploring York, especially, you know, you said you lived fairly close by to it as you were growing up. What were some of your favorite spots that you just, even now, like you would like to just maybe walk past again, revisit, and just, you know, kind of take it in again?
In York, you mean specifically?
In York, yes.
I mean, King's Manor I love, and luckily I still get to go to King's Manor occasionally. I mean, King's Manor itself is of such interest in history. I mean, it's where the Henry VIII's Council of the North met. It used to be part of St. Mary's Abbey, so it's a really important building, which we don't appreciate when we're walking in and go into the refectory for our coffee on a morning or go into lectures. But also, I think what I find about York is you can go down any corner and see some of the greatest architectural features and places and sites. I mean, if you walk from King's Manor through Booth and Bar, and then you're just met with York Minster, just huge, humongous in front of you. And all you have to do is turn to your right, and that's where Guy Fawkes used to live. You know, it's insane. And then walk a little bit further, and you have some of the oldest shops in the world. I'm trying to remember what else. And then, I mean, and also, if you walk down a little bit further and take a left, there's a tiny little alleyway, and you can go to one of the earliest churches as well, which is sort of hidden behind, you know, the great city. There's just so much in York that's just of interest. And the church I'm talking about, if anyone has seen, I think you had it in the US, this is why I'm mentioning this, is the series Gentleman Jack, which is about Anne Lister, who was one of the first sort of open lesbian women. And she got married in the church, but sort of, you know, underhandedly. I was consultant for that particular episode, so it was really interesting getting to be in this church, and they recreated it as if it was 19th century. So what I would say about York is, as well, get the book Alleyways and Snickleways. It's been out for years. You can still buy it off Amazon. And Snickleways means back alley, I suppose, you know, just ginnel or whatever you want to call it. And there are loads of them dotted around in York, and they'll take you to these hidden places. You know, some of them open out into, you know, 13th, 14th century houses, which are just ruined. So you have to get the sort of guidebook or get a tour to find out some of the greatest history that has ever been.
Yeah, I did notice that it's a little bit of a labyrinth, especially there in the city center with like all these different turns and back alleys, and some will just kind of like end abruptly or just go here or go there. And I also kind of noticed is that they are quite off the beaten path too. Like if I just randomly start walking around, I notice I'm probably I'm like the only one down there, even though like kind of like the main central I guess Market Square, I'm not sure if that's really what it's called, is like packed with people. And then I just, go over here a little bit and there's no one. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. Got the place to myself. So I can dig it. But it's just, I have noticed that just how old everything is. There was one time I went to like a secondhand bookshop in York. It was, what's the name of the gate that's closest to King's Manor? Like as you're walking away from that one.
I know the bookshop you mean, just down there on High Petergate.
Yeah, exactly. And so I went in there, and I'm talking with the woman behind the cash register, and she's got this bookshelf behind her, and she had like all these really old looking leather bound books, and I just kind of asked her about them. She pulls one out for me and sets it on the counter, and she says, "Yeah, this one was printed completely in French. It was printed in like the 1500s." And I'm like, you do realize that this book that you just showed me that's casually sitting on your bookshelf, this is like older than my my U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is like in a maximum security facility, and you got this 16th century book just casually sitting behind your cash register on a bookshelf. I mean, I'm like, wow.
Yeah, but I think the US Constitution is a little bit more significant than this random 16th century book. So, I mean, I suppose we are spoiled that it's just history to us. Your history is baby histories. We say 100 years is new. That's barely history. So I think it's just what you get to know is medieval era that's quite old, but it goes back quite a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, even with my job as an archaeologist here, like for us, it has to be like more than 50 years old for us to consider it archaeology.
Well, same with us.
Yeah.
So I think it is the same. Yeah.
Okay. So, but that was just one thing I just thought was just really, really cool how old everything is. And of course I kind of get like similar cracks about like my country not being quite as old, especially like when I go to places like Israel and other places in the Middle East. It's like
that's history.
Yeah, it's like US. You're not that old. Is what I get a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So what I want to ask you about next, just kind of shifting gears a little bit here. One thing I like to ask all my guests is some of the takeaways and the life lessons that we learn from, our travels and our adventures. And, and I'm sure probably with you, get to explore some of these different pilgrim routes and studying into the depth that you have, you probably picked up and taken away a few of them yourself. So, so what have been some of your big takeaways and life lessons that, you've kind of been able to implement into your own life from, either getting out there on these routes themselves or studying them more in depth, or maybe just even studying, history the way you have been?
I think it's a bit of a cliche to say this, but perhaps Rome wasn't built in a day. And that applies to so many different things in that I think when you're both studying these kind of things, but when you're also walking, say, pilgrim routes, and you're just a researcher in general, I suppose, your mind's constantly working. You think about life in the broader sense, I suppose, and you shouldn't be, this is your journey, make it your own sort of thing. Stop comparing yourself to others, because look how life has changed. History repeats itself. Oh, God's sake, does it? So nothing's new. Everything's old hat. So don't compare your own journey to other people's. Just set on your own road. And I think what's really interesting about studying history as well as archaeology, but archaeology too, is, people might have watched The Dig on Netflix recently, is that we're constantly facing new struggles and boundaries and whatever. And it's kind of about being just sort of gung-ho in your approach. Passion will get you everywhere, not just talent. It is sort of about passion, and that you need to remember that, as I say, things just keep going and going. You just got to keep doing your own thing. And I know it's probably a very soppy thing to say, or I'm not really saying anything, but I think it's the most important thing, because you see when you watch The Dig or whatever, that everyone has imposter syndrome. And even these people who were building these Roman walls and then rebuilding in the medieval era, a lot of them failed. A lot of them had to be rebuilt,
Yeah.
Shit happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that for many people that could be hard, especially in this day and age, with, not doing the comparison game, especially on social media, where a lot of people are like, well, I don't have as many followers as that person. So, there must be something wrong with me, right? It's like, well,
who cares?
It's just, they're doing something different than you. But I always tell people is that, you're your own unique story.
Yeah,
I mean, no one else can write your story but you. And so that's, what I try to tell people as well. So I like that, that I appreciate that point for sure. And, kind of going along with that too, what I want to ask you is, at the start of this conversation, we talked about just all the different roles and responsibilities that you have in your life. You're doing this, you're working as a lecturer and you lead 2 programs, which, god dang, that already gives me a headache just talking about those alone. But then, of course, you're writing books and you're contributing to journals. You're doing this podcast with me, and you're doing other broadcast work out there too. And then, of course, just trying to do your own thing, having time for yourself. And so, how do you kind of sort of strike a balance, with everything? And maybe balance is not the right word. I don't know if we can fully strike a balance, but how do you kind of manage all these different, tasks and roles and responsibilities to show up effectively in all those areas?
When you find out the answer to that question, tell me, because I have no bloody clue. Essentially, I don't know. And I get this question asked so many times, and I'm like, don't ask me, because I don't have balance. It is essentially running on the hamster wheel until one gets tired. But in this day and age, I think this is why it's so important to just do whatever the hell you want. Just do your own thing. Just be yourself and do what makes you happy. And I think that's really important, particularly even if you're just an academic these days, or a historian or archaeologist. It's so important to just do what makes you happy, to just research or excavate or whatever makes, what's enjoyable to you. Because I think within academia, there's a culture of overwork, for one thing. I think within the world today, there is a culture of overwork, which I think is so toxic. It's not productive. We celebrate people for just working until they drop. And it doesn't matter how much you work. I shouldn't say this, but it's true. Let's be honest. You're replaceable. If you work 20 hours a day and die tomorrow, someone's going to come and fill in for you. So what's the point if it's not making you happy? So I think it's more about, particularly since COVID has hit, and I think everyone's reevaluating, what's important in life. I stick to my hours when it comes to being an academic, when it comes to being a lecturer, and I'm doing the projects that I want to do, creating businesses that I want, because I don't want to do this for I don't just want to work a 9 to 5, or if you can call that being an academic, 9 to 5, the rest of my life. I want to do other things. I want to get my message out there. Or what's the point? What's the point of me studying all this if it's going to stay in my ivory tower of academia? I want people to get the message. I want to, the general public to hear what I'm doing and to be educated and learn more about their history and their past. So I think it's just focusing on what's important to you and readjusting if you can, as best you can. We're all just trying to get out of here alive.
Yeah. And, I really like that point too, because I've heard similar stories from like other people who would commit so much to their life to, just, grinding away, making a ton of money. And then they'll talk about once they made it to the end, okay, you're making me lose my train of thought here. And they talk about once they make it to the end, all that money that they just made, millions or billions of dollars or whatever, it can't buy back any of that time that they, lost, where they wish they had spent more time with their family or with their kids or, whomever else. And it's like all that money and all those possessions, it's not going to buy back any of that. I mean, it's all pretty much worthless, at the end of your life. And but would live on. And I think what people would reflect on, at the very end, which I hope for us is many, many, many years down the road, is that, I'd like to just look back on things and say, man, that was a hell of a ride. That was a lot of fun. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, that fancy TV I bought that one time was so awesome. I mean, I'm not going to say stuff like that. So, but
yeah, exactly. And I think that's the point, is just, you can't take it with you, as my grandmother used to always say. You can't take your money and possessions. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Right on. Well, as we start drawing near the end of our time, what do you have on the docket for this year? I mean, you said you're kind of doing like online lecture series. Of course, you got the book coming out. I think, once things opening up, I know you've led tours in the past in some places, and maybe you might be doing that again. So, but yeah, what do you have on the docket for 2021?
Oh, God, lots going on. So yeah, the book is written, but it's just been edited. So that's going to be out in 2022 now, just because of COVID, everything got pushed back.
Right.
But it'll be out early 2022. I'm in the middle of the moment working my agent on the next book, which I can't say too much about it, but let's just say it's very interesting. And we have touched on it. I touched on it earlier. So when I can reveal more, I will. And then, I'm leading, shit ton of tours. It seems like I don't have a week spare over the summer, assuming that COVID, is put to rest.
Right.
I'm doing a tour on Cistercian architecture. I'm doing a tour on medieval York. I'm doing one of the cathedrals of the southwest, so Winchester, Wells, Salisbury, that area, and I'm also doing Glastonbury, another one in Glastonbury, but I think that's next year. Couple of those. I've got 2 edited volumes coming out because I just created a new series with Brepols, which is a very old publishing house in Belgium. And we just got a series on sort of medievalism and neo-medievalism. So we have a lot of people write about Game of Thrones and things, but at the moment I'm writing about Assassin's Creed, for example, and the use of, virtual worlds and virtual reconstructions and how we can use them for distance learning and things like that, teaching medieval architecture essentially. So 2 edited volumes out on that. I have a seminar series in relation to that called What is Medieval, once a month. So you can find us on Twitter at is medieval, I think it is, something like that. So if you want to follow, we have some really great speakers, a lot of US speakers, Canadian, from all over the world. So if anyone's interested in medievalism and how it's applied to contemporary society, then they should tune in. And I think that's everything. I don't know. There's probably some TV and radio and stuff in there too.
Right. Well, I'll just encourage our listeners just to go, connect with you on social media, where I'm sure you'll be posting about upcoming stuff and everything. So, all right. Well, so we got the book to look forward to in 2022. But right now you do have a book that's out there right now. You got, like I said, it's Pilgrim Routes of the British Isles. And we talked about it a little bit, but just can you give us a little bit more of synopsis on it, and also where can we find it?
Yeah, you can find it at bookshop.org. That's a great, up and coming website where we actually get money back and independent bookstores get money back. So if anyone's not heard of bookshop.org, please have a look. You can get it on Amazon, all local stores. I think even in the US, quite a lot of local stores have it. But the book is about 7 pilgrim routes across the British Isles, which I use the term loosely, of course. Let's just say Britain. And there, if you're a hiker, if you're a walker, or if you're just interested in the history of England, I suppose, history of Britain, particularly where you can walk to find these great places. It's not just the interesting sites associated with saints. It's also those interesting sites you can find along the way that might not be on the official trails. So I think it's got something for everything, and a great introduction on what's pilgrimage. What are the saints? Why are they so important?
Yeah. And I will certainly, recommend that our listeners pick up a copy. I enjoyed reading it because I really liked, you broke down each of these routes so well. And, even it's just something as simple as like a hill somewhere and the significance behind a hill. I mean, most people would just walk over and just think, oh, I'm just walking up this hill. But no, it's just a hill that was revisited by this or where this happened. So you definitely go really in depth, which I had a lot of fun with. And also, I was I would have like Google Maps open so that way I can kind of like zoom in and follow along as I was reading. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun.
And there are maps. There's really interesting maps done by a friend of mine, Jim Brightman, who did some wonderful maps in there. And it's got a little key for each little interesting feature. So it's all in there. Okay.
And I'll leave a link to it in the show notes for the listeners to go and find it there. So what I have for you next in our wrap up, I also asked my guests to issue a challenge to our listeners because, we're covering a lot of good information today. Information, as we've discussed, can only take us so far. Action has to, follow up to get things done. So what challenge would you issue to our listeners today for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
That's such an interesting question, but it's also a difficult one, particularly at the time of COVID. Don't stay indoors.
Right.
But I think what I would just say is get out there, just get out. And even, I think what I would say a challenge is to explore your local area. I know it depends where you live, But particularly if you're a Brit, you don't focus on your local area, and sometimes it has the greatest and most interesting history. And I know obviously I'm all about history, but it's about getting out there, knowing your history, knowing your ancestry as well, because you can also find out stuff about your own family and things just from taking a walk around. It's like, I did this recently, and I took a walk down my local canal, and when as I was walking by the river, and did a little bit, got on my phone as I was going along and looking at Google, and it's, oh, I had no idea that this canal was so important, and it's because that they had no money to put into the railway and blah 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 and all of this, and there was a big going on. But my point is, my grandparents have died, so you have to get out there and find it, or we're not gonna, we need to keep putting this history out there. So look at your local area, because we never visit it. We always go elsewhere to do that. That's my challenge, is the local area. Find out more, more about your ancestry, and don't let history go to waste.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point, especially, in this modern day, and humans, we're just naturally creatures of habit. If we're going from one place to the next, we'll take the same route every single time. But I'm like, well, instead of like taking that route, how about you make that turn there and see what's down that way, and then reconnect to get to where it is that you need to go and see what you can find. And, I've done that in where I'm from. I'm from like a small town in rural Michigan, where we have lots and lots of back roads. And, I see like, nice farmsteads and homes. And I even found like there was a sign. I found this years ago, but I found it doing exactly what I'm describing. But it was marking the place where this great fire started back in the 19th century that swept across like the thumb of Michigan. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even realize that event started here. So it's like, but I just, decided to take a different route to get somewhere. And lo and behold, I find this cool thing. So
well, there you go. And I recently did my ancestry, and I did find out that my great, I think it's 8 times something, great uncle was Jeremiah Dixon. You might know who he is, Mason-Dixon line.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say that name sounds very familiar, but I just couldn't put an event to it.
The Mason-Dixon line that was sort of marked out across the US from the Confederate states, to mark out the Confederate states. So he was just a geographer. That's as much as I know. I think he was there to do a job. But it's the fact that I can now create awareness of that is fascinating.
Oh, very, very cool. And I will say that's also a first to come up on the podcast too. So, exploring and trying to find adventure in your own backyard. So I appreciate that answer. Yeah. So very cool. All right. So what I have for you next is my final 3. These are 3. I like to think that they're fun questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show. And so you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of these 3 questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
I can't answer this question. I don't have favorites. Actually, it's too hard. I want to say probably, again, it's a cliche, Notre Dame Cathedral.
Yeah.
I don't need to elaborate on that.
Okay. Right on. I still have yet to actually get to France in general. I don't know why I've missed out on the country like so far, even though I lived in Europe for a year. I missed out on France, but yeah. So put that on the list for me. All right. And the next question, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Oh God, I have so much on my bucket list. I want, I see a lot of mine is work related. Is that sad? I don't know. It is kind of sad, but one thing I really do want, I want to go, I just want to go traveling, I suppose. I really want to go to Southeast Asia. So that's one, but I would like a New York Times bestseller. So maybe I'll go to Asia once I've got the New York Times bestseller.
Okay. I don't suppose any of your bucket list items include the US at all.
Well, another thing I really want to do is a US book tour, and do a university speaking tour, and do a TV series and a column. So if anyone wants to give me those, that'd be great. I would love to spend like a year in the US. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So big plans for the US potentially. So right on. All right. So, and the last question, and this is a 2-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild? And this is so difficult. I would say my favorite animal is tiger. In the wild, no. I've seen it in a zoo, but no, I don't think I've ever been anywhere to see it in the wild. But no, it's a tiger. And again, I don't think I need to elaborate. I think it's quite obvious why.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have ambitions to go to Southeast Asia, and I think I've heard of people seeing them in like places like in India and everything. So
yeah, if you went to South Africa or somewhere, yeah, but I've never been yet.
Okay, all in due time, though. All in due time.
Yes.
So
Safari's on the bucket list.
All right, well, Dr. Wells, that's it. That's all the questions I have for you. But before we call it a day here, let's just recap one more time where our listeners can go to connect with you. You know, you're out there in the internet and social media space. You got the book, you got a website. So yeah, fill us in on all the details. Where can our listeners reach out and connect with you?
Okay, so my website is emmajwells.com. So pretty easy. My Instagram is at Wells_Emma. My Twitter is Emma_J_Wells. I think it's that. And I'm also on Facebook. I think if you just put Emma J. Wells, you'll find my public page. I think that's everything. Is that everything?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll get all of those linked up in the show notes, and then also where they can pick up a copy of the books. What was the name of that site one more time? The org site?
Bookshop.org. They help independent retailers as well as authors to get back. It's kind of a rival to Amazon now. Okay,
bookshop.org. All right, I'll get that linked up in the show notes as well. Make it nice and convenient for our listeners to find. All right. Well, Dr. Wells, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. I know we had to go back and forth a little bit to get this set up, and we were facing some issues with the internet today, but looks like we're able to make this happen. So yeah, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you and the work that you do, and I certainly value our friendship. So yeah, it's just been great to have you here, and thanks so much for sharing your insights with myself and the listeners today.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the listeners for listening in. It's a pleasure.
All right. Right on.